neural pathways and deliberate practice. More of an emphasis on the neural pathways. All right, if you look at this picture right here, this is my son Samuel. This is about 2 years ago. We were hiking up in the Mount Rainier area up in Washington. And as we're hiking along, my wife and Sam were with me. I see this pathway here and I go, Sam, you got to walk up in that pathway. Now, before I go into too much explanation, you can see the backpack on his back. Imagine for a second that there's a bowling ball in that backpack and it falls out of his backpack. What is the probability that that bowling ball will stay within that pathway and roll down that hill? Those are about 6 inches on each side. Those are called bumpers, I guess. So it's a very high probability the bowling ball will stay there. That is a habit. It's a neural pathway that's been developed, compounded over time. For example, I don't think about before I go to bed that I go brush my teeth. That pathway is emblazoned pretty deep, so I've learned to focus subconsciously to brush my teeth. It's not a cognitive effort on my end. Remember, the goal is to learn to focus, to make these things habits, deep-seated habits that I don't have to think about. Initially, when you go through the process, by the way, and we start talking about rules of engagement, and I'm asking you to avoid criticism, sarcasm, judging, and relating, it's cognitive. You're going to be thinking about it. Oh, I can't do that. Dr. Emmer said I can't do that. Or I got to be careful not to relate, or I got to be careful not to judge. Cognitive. Imagine what it would be like if you could get to the point where you just do that because it's who you are. It's your identity. You don't need to think about being neutral anymore. You don't need to think about being interested and understanding. You don't need to think about developing empathy. But right now you do. We're going to reverse engineer the compounding pathways to your maladaptive behavior to adaptive behavior. Now, the difference is maladaptive is the opposite of adaptive. Dysfunctional is maladaptive, like malware. So when I say maladaptive behavior, it's something that we don't want to engage in. The goal is that you've got a current set of habits right now that you're engaged in that's like that deep neural pathway. People who are depressed or feel anxious, so depression and anxiety, their neural pathways to medicate themselves are very deep. And just so I'm very clear, there's nothing different between someone who has high anxiety or has a lot of depression and an alcoholic. You're both medicating. Something's not working, so you hide behind staying in bed. You actually get drugs, opioids, hit at you, produced or called electrochemicals, when you decide to stay in bed another hour or 2 or 4 or 6. Same thing with gaming. When you keep gaming, people who game actually start losing interest in the things they used to love to do. Why? Because the excitement, the dopamine, the anticipatory drug of playing and doing something else is now being replaced by their gaming. So it's a replacement drug. Well, all we do in the Western world is medicate people. We're not giving them the healing. We're just medicating them, so we're replacement therapy to get them through the day. I'm suggesting the healing pathway and the ability to take pain and address it head on is a reverse engineering of how you got to your addictive state. And again, so I'm clear, there isn't anyone I've ever met who isn't addicted to some behavior that is harmful. It's not working for them. There's your pathway. How do you reverse engineer it? You start by seeing yourself doing something different. Again, we'll be going into that one in a little bit more detail. But notice on the left-hand side here, that pathway isn't very well worn. As a matter of fact, it's just to the left of where you see my son. The middle one is my wife, and that's just to the left or to the right of the other one. So they're kind of sitting in this fashion. And you want to start on that far left. You have to do something to start it, and then you have an experience. If you do it over and over again, you have another experience, and that's that middle pathway. Ultimately, until you get to the far right, where my son is, that's your new habit. And that's where you're trying to go. Actually, I'm going to do another video on this to explain deeper on how you create these habits. So stand by. That'll be entitled, we'll call that one the implementation approach. And we'll be doing that video shortly. So here's your 3. The one on the right is what you currently are if you want to break a habit. The one on the left is where you're going to start. I'll see you in the next video.